You have been feeling completely out of place in your own life recently. The conversations that used to satisfy you no longer do. The routines you once moved through automatically now feel strangely heavy. Even certain places that once felt comforting seem unfamiliar somehow, almost like your spirit quietly stopped recognizing them before your mind did. And what makes this experience even more unsettling is that from the outside, your life may look mostly the same. You still wake up in the same room, still talk to many of the same people, still carry the same responsibilities. But internally, something shifted. And no matter how hard you try, you cannot force yourself back into the old version of who you were. At first, you tried to explain it away. Maybe you're just tired. Maybe you're overthinking. Maybe you simply need motivation. But deep down, you know this feeling is different. Because exhaustion eventually passes. Confusion usually becomes clearer. Yet this feeling has stayed quietly and persistently, almost like life itself has been nudging you away from something you can no longer carry. One of the strangest parts of growth is that it rarely announces itself loudly in the beginning. It often starts as discomfort, a subtle disconnect, a growing awareness that you no longer fit naturally into spaces that once defined you, like a shell becoming too small for the person you are becoming. And people around you may not fully understand this version of you yet. They notice you're quieter now, less reactive, less interested in meaningless noise. You may even notice yourself pulling away from situations you once chased for validation. Not because you think you're better than anyone, but because your soul is becoming more sensitive to what drains it. There are moments lately where you sit in a room full of people and still feel alone. Not because nobody is there, but because something inside you is searching for deeper connection now. Depth instead of distraction. Peace instead of performance. And that transition can feel incredibly isolating at first, because growth often separates you emotionally before it rearranges your external life. So for a while, you exist between versions of yourself. Not fully connected to the old life anymore, but not fully settled into the new one either. That middle space can feel awkward, uncomfortable, even lonely. But it is also sacred, because this is where awakening begins. Not in certainty, not in perfection, but in the quiet realization that you can no longer betray yourself just to remain familiar to others. And if this resonates with you, take a moment to notice how much you have already changed emotionally over the past year. The things you tolerate now are different. The things you crave are different. You are not losing yourself. You are meeting yourself more honestly than ever before. And slowly, your spirit is learning how to stop shrinking just to fit inside places it has already outgrown. One of the clearest signs that you are changing spiritually is not what you start craving, but what you can no longer stomach emotionally. Things that once entertained you now leave you feeling drained. Conversations filled with gossip feel heavy after only a few minutes. Constant drama that once felt exciting now feels exhausting. Even certain habits, environments, and routines that used to comfort you suddenly carry a strange emptiness. And at first, this shift can make you feel disconnected from people around you. Because while others still seem fully immersed in the same cycles, something inside you has started pulling away naturally. Not forcefully, not arrogantly, just quietly. You begin noticing how much energy people spend discussing other people's lives while ignoring their own healing. You notice how normalized negativity has become, how many interactions revolve around distraction instead of truth. And the more aware you become of it, the harder it becomes to participate the way you used to. This is not because you are becoming cold. It is because your inner world is becoming more selective. Growth changes your emotional taste. Your spirit starts craving peace the way it once craved stimulation. Silence begins feeling safer than shallow noise. Solitude starts feeling healthier than forced connection. And while this sounds beautiful in theory, in real life it can feel deeply uncomfortable because your old environment may still expect the old version of you to show up. People sometimes become confused when you no longer react the same way. They notice you avoiding unnecessary conflict. They notice you speaking less, observing more, protecting your energy differently. Some may even accuse you of changing too much. But they do not realize that healing always changes a person's appetite. A person who is emotionally evolving cannot continuously consume chaos without feeling sick internally. And lately, your soul has been rejecting things your old self once tolerated easily. Not because you are perfect, but because awareness changes what feels acceptable. There are habits you are beginning to outgrow emotionally before you fully outgrow them physically. That is why part of you still revisits certain patterns, even while another part of you no longer enjoys them. Transformation is rarely instant. Sometimes your spirit awakens before your life fully catches up, and this creates internal tension. You can feel the distance growing between who you were and who you are becoming. Certain jokes no longer land the same. Certain spaces no longer feel aligned. Certain friendships feel harder to maintain because your spirit is searching for sincerity while the environment still survives on performance. If this resonates with you, notice how often your exhaustion lately is emotional rather than physical. It is not just that you are tired. You are becoming less willing to abandon your peace for temporary distraction. And slowly, without even realizing it fully yet, your soul is teaching you that not everything familiar is meant to follow you into your next season. What many people never talk about is that growth comes with grief. Real growth does not only bring clarity, peace, or wisdom. Sometimes it first brings distance, silence, endings you never expected to feel so emotional. Because even when you know you are evolving, there is still a part of you that mourns what used to feel familiar. You mourn old versions of yourself. The simpler version. The version that could tolerate things without overthinking them. The version that still felt connected to certain people before life started shifting internally. And sometimes the hardest part is realizing that not every relationship was built to grow with you. Some people were connected to a specific version of you. A smaller version. A quieter version. A version that needed approval more than peace. And as you begin changing emotionally, the connection starts feeling strained in ways neither side fully knows how to explain. You may still care about those people deeply. You may still love them. But something no longer fits naturally the way it once did. Conversations feel forced. Energy feels uneven. You leave certain interactions feeling emotionally heavier instead of lighter. And that realization hurts. Because outgrowing something does not automatically make you hate it. Sometimes you grieve the very things you know you can no longer return to comfortably. That is why this season can feel so emotionally confusing. One moment you feel proud of your growth, and the next moment you feel lonely because growth has changed your connection to people, places, and routines that once grounded you emotionally. There are nights where you miss who you used to be simply because life felt more predictable then, even if it was not healthier. Even if you were shrinking yourself constantly, familiarity has a way of feeling safe, even when it is limiting. And this is where many people accidentally abandon their transformation. Not because they are weak, but because loneliness can make old environments look more comforting than they truly were. Humans naturally crave belonging. So when growth temporarily separates you from familiar spaces, your mind sometimes tries to romanticize the past. You begin remembering the comfort while forgetting the exhaustion, the connection while forgetting the misalignment. But your spirit remembers. Your spirit remembers how often you silenced yourself just to keep certain relationships stable. It remembers how tired you became pretending to be okay in environments that slowly drained your identity. It remembers how often you ignored your intuition because you feared disappointing people. And now, even though part of you still feels sadness, another part of you knows you cannot go backward anymore. That is the strange emotional tension of transformation. You are grieving and awakening at the same time. And if you have been feeling emotional lately without fully understanding why, it may not be weakness at all. It may simply be the natural grief that comes from releasing an old chapter of your life emotionally before the next one fully begins. Because there is a quiet pain in becoming someone new. Not because the new version is wrong, but because every transformation asks you to leave something behind. Sometimes it is a habit. Sometimes it is a relationship. Sometimes it is the old survival version of yourself. And the truth is, Not everyone will understand your distance during this season. Some people will interpret your growth as rejection. Others will try to pull you back toward the version of you that felt easier for them to control or predict. But healing changes people. Awakening changes priorities. And maturity often creates temporary loneliness before it creates alignment. If this resonates with you, allow yourself to stop treating your sadness like failure. You are not broken for grieving what no longer fits your spirit. You are human. And somewhere beneath the sadness, your soul already knows that this ending is not punishment. It is preparation for a life where you no longer have to abandon yourself just to feel accepted. There comes a moment during transformation where you begin realizing this change is not random. It is not just emotional exhaustion. It is not simply a phase of isolation or overthinking. Something deeper is happening beneath the surface of your life. You are being pulled upward internally. And the strange part is that this pull does not always feel exciting at first. Sometimes it feels like losing interest in things that once controlled your attention. Sometimes it feels like becoming quieter while the world around you grows louder. Sometimes it feels like your spirit is slowly disconnecting from chaos because it can no longer survive there peacefully. The version of you that once chased validation is becoming tired. Tired of proving. Tired of performing. Tired of constantly shaping yourself around environments that never truly nourished your soul. And in that exhaustion, something sacred begins happening. You start craving meaning more than attention. The goals changing inside you are proof of that. You may notice yourself thinking differently about life lately. Success alone no longer feels fulfilling enough. Temporary excitement no longer satisfies you the same way. Your spirit has started searching for something deeper than survival or appearance. Peace. Purpose, legacy, truth. Not the kind of legacy built only on achievement, but the kind built on impact. The kind where your presence genuinely helps people heal, feel safe, or feel understood. You are beginning to realize that the most valuable thing a person can become is emotionally whole. And that realization changes everything slowly. Because once your spirit tastes deeper awareness, shallow living becomes difficult to maintain comfortably. You begin protecting your energy differently. You become more intentional with your time. You stop needing constant noise to avoid your own thoughts. In fact, silence itself starts becoming transformative. There are moments lately where you feel pulled toward reflection without even understanding why. Moments where your soul seems to crave solitude, prayer, stillness, or emotional honesty. And while part of you may fear this shift, another part of you feels strangely relieved by it, as if you are finally returning to yourself after years of emotional distraction. That is what spiritual elevation often looks like in real life. It is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is simply the quiet decision to stop betraying your inner peace. And not everyone around you will understand this new focus. Some people may think you are becoming distant. Others may feel uncomfortable because your growth forces them to confront the places where they are still avoiding themselves. But your spirit cannot continue shrinking just to make others comfortable. Because the higher your awareness rises, the more sensitive you become to anything that pulls you away from alignment. You start recognizing how much of your old life was built around survival patterns instead of authenticity. You notice how often fear shaped your decisions. How often loneliness made you settle for connections that lack depth. And now something greater is asking more from you. Not perfection, not superiority, just honesty. Honesty about what drains you. Honesty about what matters now. Honesty about the life your soul is quietly trying to move toward. If this resonates with you, pay attention to what your spirit has been naturally pulling away from lately. Growth is rarely forced. Real transformation often begins through gentle detachment, through losing appetite for what no longer aligns. And although this season may feel uncertain, there is purpose inside the discomfort. Heaven does not elevate people by allowing them to remain emotionally asleep forever. Sometimes elevation begins the moment your soul becomes too awake to continue living beneath what it was created for. One of the most difficult parts of transformation is the emptiness that comes before the new chapter fully arrives. People often expect growth to feel inspiring all the time, but in reality, there is usually a season where life feels unusually quiet. Certain relationships fade, old routines fall apart, familiar emotions disappear, and for a while, it can feel like you are standing in the middle of an unfinished life. That space can feel unsettling because humans naturally want certainty. We want immediate answers, immediate direction, immediate reassurance that everything changing around us is leading somewhere meaningful. But growth rarely works that way. Before something new can truly enter your life, space has to exist for it first. And sometimes the reason life feels emptier lately is because your spirit is no longer willing to overcrowd itself with things that were never aligned in the first place. You are not being abandoned. You are being cleared emotionally. And clearing often feels lonely before it feels peaceful. There are moments where you may question yourself during this season. You look around and notice how much has shifted internally, yet the new opportunities, connections, or sense of belonging have not fully arrived yet. That waiting space can create anxiety because the old life no longer fits, but the new life has not completely formed either. It feels like standing between identities, but some of the most important transformations happen in that invisible middle space. Because emptiness has a purpose, silence has a purpose, detachment has a purpose. They create room for clarity. When your life is constantly crowded with noise, distractions, and emotionally draining connections, it becomes difficult to hear your own spirit clearly. But when things begin falling away, something deeper becomes visible. You begin noticing what truly matters to you. You begin understanding which connections actually nourish your peace and which ones only distracted you from your loneliness. You begin realizing how much energy you spent maintaining environments that no longer reflected who you were becoming. And slowly, the emptiness stops feeling like punishment. It starts feeling like preparation. Because new alignment cannot fully arrive while your hands are still clinging tightly to expired versions of your life. Sometimes God removes emotional clutter before revealing emotional purpose. Not to hurt you, but to make sure you are no longer building your future on foundations that cannot support your growth. This is why patience becomes sacred during transformation. Not passive patience, conscious patience. The kind that trusts there is meaning in what feels unfinished. The kind that understands not every delay is rejection. Some delays are protection. Some endings are redirection. And while your old life may have been filled with constant stimulation, your new life may require deeper stillness, greater discernment, more intentional connections. The transition into that kind of life cannot happen while your spirit is still attached to every old habit, every old environment, and every old emotional dependency. If this resonates with you, take a moment to notice how much space has quietly opened inside your life recently. Even if it feels uncomfortable, even if part of you still wants to fill the silence immediately, do not rush to replace what your spirit worked so hard to release. Because something important is happening in this season. You are learning that your worth is not measured by how crowded your life is. Peace sometimes enters quietly, after the noise leaves. And the emptiness you fear right now may actually be the doorway through which your most aligned life finally begins to arrive. At some point during this journey, you begin realizing that the real transformation was never only about changing your environment. It was about finally becoming honest about who you truly are underneath all the versions of yourself you created just to survive. Because for a long time, many of your choices were shaped by adaptation. You learned how to become what other people needed. You learned how to stay agreeable to avoid conflict. You learned how to shrink certain parts of yourself to maintain connection, approval, or emotional safety. And eventually, you became so used to performing that you almost forgot what authenticity even felt like. But now something inside you refuses to continue living that way. Not loudly, not rebelliously, just truthfully. You are beginning to understand that peace cannot exist where constant self-abandonment exists. No amount of external validation can compensate for the exhaustion of pretending to be someone your spirit has already outgrown. And this realization changes the way you move through life. You stop feeling the need to explain every boundary. You stop apologizing for protecting your energy. You stop forcing yourself into conversations, environments, or identities that leave you emotionally disconnected afterward. For the first time in a long time, your soul wants alignment more than approval. That shift may confuse people around you. Some individuals benefited from the old version of you, the version that overextended itself, tolerated disrespect quietly, or constantly prioritized everyone else's comfort over its own healing. But authenticity often disappoints people who were comfortable with your self-neglect. And that can be painful to accept, because you never wanted to become distant from others. You simply became unwilling to become distant from yourself anymore. There is a difference. Real growth is not becoming emotionally cold. It is becoming emotionally honest. It is recognizing that maturity sometimes requires disappointing the expectations others placed on you in order to protect the person you are becoming. And the beautiful part is that the more authentic you become, the less exhausting life starts to feel internally. You no longer spend every interaction calculating how to be accepted. You no longer carry the constant pressure of maintaining versions of yourself that were built from fear instead of truth. You begin breathing differently emotionally, more freely, more calmly, more fully. And while your life may still be unfolding, something inside you has already changed permanently. You can feel it. The old identity no longer fits naturally because your spirit has already seen beyond it. You are no longer asleep in the same ways. That does not mean you will never feel uncertain again. Growth is ongoing. Healing is ongoing. There will still be moments where loneliness visits you, where doubt returns, where old memories pull at your heart unexpectedly. But now you know something important. You know that outgrowing your old life was not failure. It was alignment. You were never meant to remain trapped inside smaller versions of yourself forever. Some chapters exist only to prepare you for the person you eventually become. And although losing those chapters can feel emotional, staying inside them forever would have cost you your spirit. If this resonates with you, stop apologizing for the ways you have changed. Stop shrinking your wisdom just to remain digestible to people committed to misunderstanding you. Stop mourning the old version of yourself as if they were the highest version you were capable of becoming. They were only the beginning. And maybe this season of your life is not about becoming someone entirely new after all. Maybe it is about finally allowing yourself to become who you were before fear convinced you to hide it.